As the sun sets at the end of a New York workday, the mind transitions from daily tasks to the cloudier, more philosophical regions of social issues, culture, and politics. In a democracy, every perspective on the world is important, and people in art and culture have surprising bodies of knowledge that can shed fresh light on today's reality. The following conversation with Rivka Galchen took place on the west side of Manhattan on October 6, 2021.
Rivka Galchen is a Canadian-American writer of Israeli descent. Her essays for The New Yorker and novels often follow the logic of rational science to mercurial ends. Her new novel, Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch, is the true account of a persecuted 17th century woman reimagined for our own troubled times. I think that we've both lived in the same neighborhood about 10 years, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And I have my reasons for choosing this neighborhood, but I want to hear yours. I think in your New Yorker article you said something like for practical reasons, but that's not really an explanation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm curious how you chose the neighborhood because this block in particular that you're on has the Baryshnikov Center and has like a tiny bit of magic, and the market opened up, I think, like 10 years ago, almost exactly when we came to the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually came to the neighborhood because my partner has 3 sons, and he was looking for a place where they could all fit. And their best friends from kindergarten had an apartment across the hall from this one that was available. So it kind of all came together in that way.
Let's talk about then some of the things you describe in the New Yorker article, the different businesses. It's felt to me at times, this neighborhood is very strange, I would say. It's not just unloved, it's seriously weird with so many different kinds of groups passing through. And then also this carnival of whoever's going to Javits in a given week of the year. This week it's Comic-Con. But it's fascinating though for just this weird, diverse set of experiences at any given moment of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like the neighborhood is not unified like a lot of neighborhoods are by culture, place of origin, or outlook. It sort of doesn't have that unity. Instead, it has a kind of almost like a unity like an airport or so, there's just it's sort of the drama of who's in the bathroom crying. It's just like a weird population. It's a weird, incoherent population in I think a nice way. Yeah.
I mean, there's a great line in the piece about if I wore, I can't remember which neighborhood you're describing, I think it's in Brooklyn, if I wore what I'm wearing in that neighborhood here, I would look demented or something like that.
What I think is funny is that even though I don't think it really has a name, as opposed to Hell's Kitchen, they call it Hell's Pantry, or because there used to be a lot more kind of there's still quite a bit, but a lot more kind of nightclubs, strip clubs, and prostitution.
Right.
There were a lot of buttonhole kind of names for the neighborhood as well, although those also feel slightly like they're about the neighborhood from kind of 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's slightly different. It's not the daytime neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget the carriages with the horses in stables and tenement buildings, the gentleman's club, the taxi repair stands, the DHL. I mean, all these things that just are so incoherent. But I think where you are farther east is more of like the fashion district, and that's kind of faded, of course. I mean, the Giant Needle is like this kind of tomb to that neighborhood in some ways, right?
Well, and that's also been interesting to watch because it is a no longer present garment district, and I think still a lot of it is still zoned as a garment district, and you do look up and you see sort of like what look like 70-year-old bolts of fabric or sort of those strange mannequins. And then I don't know if it's even going to work, but then you saw this attempt to sort of rejuvenate the idea of Made in the USA, which of course in my childhood was a right-wing slogan and then sort of became like a left-wing slogan, but you saw it in the neighborhood. I don't know if it'll stay. Like here and there, little dottings of kind of small ateliers.
So one of the most surprising things about your education is you went to medical school, right?
No, I went to medical school because I think most people like individuate and rebel around like 13, 14, 17. I sort of individuated and rebelled at 27 or 29, maybe even 35. It depends how you market. So I wasn't someone who had grown up wanting to be a doctor and then found out it wasn't for me. I was just someone who came from a family where they thought you should, it's a typical story. You should be a doctor or maybe a lawyer, but probably a doctor. So I kind of just was very obedient, and that's how it happened. Now that I'm out, I see how interesting that setting was. But when I was there, it was like the wrong neighborhood for me. I didn't know why I lived there or why I was spending my days like that. So.
And you went through the whole course.
I went through the whole course because I am just not rebellious. I just couldn't quit. I take the motto about not quitting and turn it into like a vice, basically. It's something I've noticed.
Right.
Yeah.
I was looking in your different writings for writings about medicine. I would assume you would make use of that as material, right? And you don't in a very obvious way. I mean, you wrote about this young doctor in the pandemic, but I see though then a theme carried throughout in different books, such as the new one, Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch. This kind of tension between things like magic and science, or you like the area where there's kind of uncertainty about which has authority over the other. Would you say that's something that carries through?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just because your apartment is sort of an art apartment, I sort of feel like someone like, and again, because I read and don't speak, I'm not sure how to say her name, but Hilma af Klint, I think is sort of almost exactly kind of manifests interests that I have, where it's sort of, there's kind of systems and logic and things that we associate mostly with science, but that of course become really interesting at the peripheries. That area has always been sort of hot and magnetic for me. Also from the other side, there are lots of ways to talk about scientific stories, but often when you look close at them, they have arcs that have to do with passion or paranoia or superstition, and they enter into this other realm, and something very interesting happens.
I mean, obviously, writing novels, you need a central character. I mean, you can't just write about the things you wrote about in Everyone Knows Your Mother's a Witch without having the compelling story of somebody, in this case, like a real life story. But this character, Katerina Kepler, is sort of imperfect in many ways, but she's also obviously very intelligent and very charismatic, and which is exactly what gets her into trouble. Did you find in your research, I know that this was a real historical figure, but probably not very elaborately described, how much of a percentage of it did you have to make up? How much did you really get from what you knew from her son's case or what have you?
I don't know why I was so drawn to her, but I was, because there's countless incredible and horrifying stories from history, and you know, she's just one of them. But I think one reason was that there was just enough information, but not enough, so there was room for projection and in interesting ways. So just a few of the details. I knew she was the mother of one of the kind of greatest mathematicians of the millennium, and I think that gave me confidence that she had certain types of characteristics, so that she might
something on to her.
Yeah, that there was some connection there with a certain way of thinking, and because she was illiterate. There were almost no writings of hers. I mean, there's no writings and her voice isn't present, but there were a couple details that come out in the trial, which is well documented and preserved partially because her son was famous. And one of them was just this little detail that when she was young, she would gather branches to insulate the barn area and keep the animals warm. So it was just like a tiny detail like that, which seemed important to me. And also that she did actually sort of, like a lot of women at that time before medicine was formalized, was kind of a physician of sorts. And the main point I had to triangulate with her, was that she was widowed early, and she had to make her own living for decades, and she did, which is kind of
She lived to be an old age, especially for that time,
Yeah, she was probably the oldest woman in her town, or almost the oldest woman in her town at the time of her trial.
And what's funny about it is certainly her personality is something, but it's like her urge to help people is actually what gets her in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I also sort of feel like she's one of those people who compounds a problem. Like often you sort of will be in a situation, you think, well, okay, this isn't going well, and I'll step back. And I think I thought of her as a personality who then takes 2 steps forward. Even in the way she managed the trial was very much like an Oscar Wilde kind of a trial. Where it didn't have to happen at all. It began with her saying, "I'm being slandered," which was a reasonable thing to say, but of course set in motion this whole system that was then going to kind of juggernaut on top of her. And that interested me as well as a personality type. I thought, and I connected it with the kind of math science head of people I know. I mean, it's a little bit of a trope, but I think kind of true, this faith that because something is true, it's consequential, or because you've explained your position, people will then respond to the explanation.
See the illuminated truth.
Exactly.
Capital T.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're leading to. This is a historic.
The present tense.
Yeah, exactly. And because this is a 17th century, early 17th century story, but I mean, good history writing, I think, is something that always comments on the present moment. As I was reading it, I was actually thinking about my own conflicts and about the dangers of social media or cancel culture. We didn't just invent these in the last, 20 years with Facebook, but maybe they've become amplified now.
Yeah, I actually feel I have almost no gift for the present tense, and the reason I feel that, I guess, is because I'm overwhelmed with fear and dread about it. So it actually was a way to admit to myself that I was thinking about these things by traveling back in time, because I actually remember very well the first kind of fear of society kind of moment I had, and I was working at a magazine and I just remember having a feeling about certain dynamics and people there that it was like the collectivization of farms, and how people would just sort of turn in their neighbors for sort of nonsense in order to get their farm. And I just thought, I'm in that situation. If we were under Stalin, I would be turned in. I know I would. And that feeling, I don't have it so much personally, because for the variables of who I am at this moment don't intersect so much with kind of where the arrows are going. But I find it almost even more painful to watch it happen to others and feel relatively helpless or at least lost.
Corporate culture, I think, which I've rarely experienced in any serious way, but I think in some ways New York City does feel like a buffer to a lot of what's going on in the world. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, you grew up in the Midwest. Some of us came to New York City to be safe.
Absolutely,
in a way,
yeah.
which is a bizarre thing to say about this neighborhood in particular, because it's always felt a little bit dangerous, but there's something about it that feels comforting to me in the sense that no one cares. I want to ask you about, as somebody who writes as part of what I do for a living, and I really suffer doing it. Can you please tell me the secret of how a person actually manages to write so much? I mean, you must have a routine, right? And
yeah, no, I mean, I think that's interesting.
I don't believe
I think
people
almost every writer, well, certainly myself, I always feel like I think this is quite standard, but it's still painful. I always think I'm getting nothing done. I'm worthless. I'm only my word count, which is really unhealthy. But I realize apparently my chosen motivation scheme. So I think I could have, if I were going to choose one, if I was going to go shopping for a motivation scheme, I'd choose a different one. But that's mine, basically. It's just a horrible feeling that comes over me when I haven't gotten as much work done as I would have liked to that day.
I know for myself that if I think too much about the structure of something, that I've already kind of failed. I have to really act on intuition in the beginning. If I've got a way in, an idea, an image, that's where it really needs to start. That always has served me much better, but it's made me more of an essayist perhaps than a rigorous art historian. I don't know, but
I love that form, and I sort of feel I remember the first time someone pointed out to me, because to me it was like a revelation, that a painting usually has a location that it invites you in, but then you can go through it in all different orders, of course.
Right.
And I thought, oh, that is how I felt like that is part of the pleasure of moving through it. I also like the instability of it, because I sort of am propelled by a sort of authoritative voice, as almost everyone is. But I just think, oh, it's almost like a way around it, where you have a brief kind of encounter with a charismatic argument, and then you think, I don't know, maybe.
Rivka Galchin's latest book, Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch, has been shortlisted for the Atwood Gibson Writers Trust Fiction Prize. Her essay about New York's unloved neighborhood is available on the New Yorker's website, newyorker.com. The following conversation with Dasha Shishkin took place in Roxbury, New York on October 14th, 2021.
Dasha Shishkin is a Soviet-born artist living in Brooklyn, New York. Her elaborate drawings, often executed on blemished sheets of paper and wrinkled mylar, acknowledge social satirists of the past while presenting contemporary life as an ongoing carnival of desire, vanity, and decadence. Dasha, since the first time I heard your name, I have been playing with it in my mind. It's become this really obsessive Dasha Shishkin, this thing that I just repeat over and over again. And forgive my ignorance about Russian names. Is Dasha a short name?
It's basically informal name.
Right.
It's
Like
informal
Misha.
for Daria. So in
Daria.
this case, it's I think the same number of letters, but it's just more informal.
I've noticed this about people who come and learn English becomes their new language, but they become fascinated by strange words in English,
Yeah,
vocabulary words that really stand out for them. And if you're a painter, you often kind of use those words to name your paintings or name your shows in some cases. And you had a show in Santa Barbara, I think, not long ago, which was titled
Harry Icket.
Harry Icket.
Yes.
Which kind of sounds like Harry Cricket.
Or Ferry Ticket.
Ferry Ticket.
Yes.
You enjoyed the nonsense of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
But I think also somebody like P.J. Woodhouse who
Right.
blew my mind when, Bertie Wooster, the book starts, I forget which one, but it's I had my tea and B or toast and B.
Right.
And the fact that bacon was abbreviated and it was the first sentence, that way of if you don't need it, why bother? So I thought the same, when I draw, I'm well, this person is sitting down, they don't really need feet. So you omit the feet, so it becomes that B.
It represents a kind of sophistication that's particular to me, to the 1920s or something, that kind of early modern people making up names, and they have the privilege of being kind of, Sebastian Fleites in Brideshead Revisited carries around a teddy bear, this kind of twee affectation or childlike affectation or something. But I see your work fitting into that time period, though, in particular, because it feels to me a lot like Toulouse-Lautrec and Japonism, and also German Expressionism. And I mean, I can see a lot of art history in it, but you like that time period in some ways.
I do, and I think partially the artifice and the pretense, I'm genuinely intrigued. And I think to some extent, just the idea of clubbiness that you have mentioned, it's that club of one's own. I am my own club, and I'm the one who tries to get out, and I can't.
Right.
And I think just like you mentioned with art history, I think the inadvertent quoting that happens, because once you're exposed to information, it's very difficult to get rid of it. And I think to some extent the whole, often conversation around Picasso and or especially on the very primitive level, oh man, he could draw so well, why cubism, why, distortions, but it's exactly that, trying to get rid of things that so you can suddenly invent pancakes, and you can't.
I love historical affinities. I love it when one period feels an affinity for another period in the past. I feel like we're in a kind of tumultuous period now, which is a lot like it was between the first two wars. The feeling of gender bending is going on, which was very common in Berlin and Weimar in those years. And these were all kind of signs of modernism and new freedoms people had at that time, but are really prevalent right now and just as controversial in some ways too. As your work, do you think of those things consciously as you're depicting these figures, or is it more for you just a kind of tumult of different characters?
Honestly, I think when the work actually gets made, there is very little of conscious construct that happens, and it's kind of. But I think in retrospect, when I look back at even older work or at things as current as last week, I realize there are certain ways that I can relate work to the current events, things that are sort of running in the back of my mind or one's mind. But I think at the same time, I am definitely living vicariously through the work that I make to some extent. But with that said, the debauchery is also that way of violence on paper, or again, debauchery on paper, anything that kind of you still come out, you can still go to bed at 9.
Right.
While at the same time you can have that sort of aspect. On one hand, I'm a benevolent creator. If I draw something that is terrifying to me, it still doesn't really exist because these are not magic pencils, they're just pencils, etc. And it can always be turned upside down and suddenly it becomes a landscape. As much as I am politically active and I have very strong opinions about sort of current events and freedoms that are being trampled all over the world, at the same time I do realize that my work is frivolous and it is about that sort of not only nonsensical but also kind of all permissible unaccountability.
I think that what your work does do politically, though, is kind of what Jane Austen did in her time, and what painters of social life like Manet and Caillebotte and people like that did in their times, and especially German expressionist painters, James Ensor and Emil Nolde. I mean, these are the references I see when I look at your work. They were trying to kind of unmask hypocrisy and unmask these different aspects of social and political life in these specific characters, to render them as maybe ridiculous but also in some ways sympathetic.
Oh, absolutely. And I think everybody who you've named is somebody who I'm extremely fond of. And I think often enough work or a position at large, but at the same time, sometimes that happens when you encounter a work and you just see the eye, the way kind of like that brush moves or a drawing is made, and you inadvertently store it and then you borrow freely from the storage because technically it's yours now.
If you can remember it.
If you can remember it
and
well
replicate
enough.
it.
But all the German expressionists, you name all that sort of horror of street life that was happening during, the proper times and improper times, and it's in the same city on the same Thursday night. So that idea that if the word "but" exists, why can't it be drawn, for example?
Yes. Speaking of drawing, your work is very much about drawing and also kind of like cheap materials, even rejected materials like mylar that's crumpled and things like that. Was that a conscious choice, or are there just qualities to that you like?
It was a conscious choice because I think it started as this sort of the underdog feeling, like in the art shop there is always that not even pile of like this is 50% off, but it's like things that are literally thrown away, and they're like, oh, I'll take that. No, Chris, your sheet will just give you a new one. I'm like, no, I'll buy it. But because I feel like that waste, I don't know, it's I don't know what it is, and it's not a Soviet upbringing of frugality because it's I know for sure it's not that.
Right.
It's like that feeling like that's waste. And also I feel like to some extent what I'm making, since I don't necessarily have a conception of the work in advance, therefore what if it's a flop? I go out not necessarily looking for damaged materials, but I like to come and say, give me your cheese ends. And then suddenly it's like a roll of canvas, like, well, it's this narrow, but it's that long. Right. And they're like, oh, that's perfect. And then you make a scroll, or you put 10 of them, and that's... So to some extent, sometimes it becomes... It can appear as a shtick, but at the same time, sometimes it's a nice way to break up the blank canvas.
It's the blank canvas. It's the opposite of that in some ways, and I think that it's a set of limitations: the size of the paper and the coloration and what it's doing. But it seems to me that it suggests forms to you, like the wrinkles are already suggesting certain kinds of figures, certain kinds of scenes.
And I think also at the same time, since I begin without a set composition or a set narrative even to kind of get myself going. So often it's like that goes for a walk moment, and at the same time it's again the eye that leads to the second eye, to the nose, to the face, and then the action follows. So I think having any sort of blobs is a very useful thing.
Right. This theme of decadence is something I see in the work, and it's historically a subject in like the 1890s, Huysmans and Auribert, this book like Against Nature, this kind of aesthete who does everything backwards intentionally, but it's so sophisticated. But it was decadence 100 years ago was considered, like the decline of civilization, essentially. And I see a lot of that kind of debauchery in your work as well. Do you feel, coming from another country, that the United States or the world in general is in this state of decline, or do you have still like a sense of hopefulness that it's all going to it's just another phase?
I think on one hand, the idea of decadence, it's again another very accurate point, because I definitely, as a teenager, I kind of discovered Oscar Wilde and my mind was blown, and I saw Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'm like, How is it possible that it exists in the world already made and packaged? But at the same time, I think as I am, in 44, I am thinking, you know what, I'm going to be dead soon-ish. And I will not see, like, when is the kind of like unbearable heat going to come? In 50 years, I probably will be dead. Okay. On one hand, I think that, and it makes me sleep better. At the same time, I really hope that the world is just going through like this, like a teenage acne or something like this that's going to move in, because I feel like the extreme of badness is so severe that it just has like a horrible pimple has to burst and clear skin to follow. I don't know.
I think sometimes that that we think it's the end of the world because it's the end of the world, specifically the world we know, but maybe the world will go on, it's just not in that form anymore.
I guess the unfairness of it, that's
Yeah.
what bothers me the most. Like,
Right.
apart from, obviously, our dependence on oil, our dependence on consumption, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. But I think the unfairness that there's always somebody who has to do the dirty work. But I think also I'm always debating the idea of whether individual can affect change or it has to be a larger grouping to actually
Yeah.
do anything. And I think suddenly if so many scholars say like, no, it has to be a giant group to affect the change, then we as individuals are let off the hook. And I think that is where I sort of get really desperate and furious, because I do believe in individual affecting change and the sort of like, and I mean, to some extent, maybe me reaching out for the damaged piece of paper comes out of the fact like, you know what, I'll do fine. I'll
I'm
do
doing my
great
part.
things with this, damaged quote unquote piece of paper.
A solo exhibition of Dasha Shishkin's work titled Pickles is on view at Nancy Littlejohn Fine Arts in Houston, Texas. She is currently working on new print editions with Flying Horse Editions, Overpass Projects, and Parsons School of Design.